Hey fearsome friends, tonight we're going shopping, so remember to pack your pepper spray, charge your mobile, and stick with your shopping partners. It can be a dangerous business. From terrorists to drug addicts and sleazy men, you've got to be extra careful out there. So sit back, relax, and get cozy, comfy, warm. Are you scared yet? Keep being creepy. So I got some Dunkin Donuts this morning, and it brought this story back to my mind, so I figured I'd share it here. During high school and college, I worked at a Dunkin Donuts for about 7 years and bounced around to a few different locations. I was used to working at the D&D in my town, where we would get the yeast rings delivered periodically and frost them ourselves as needed. Later on, I transferred to a new shop about half an hour from my house with all the same responsibilities, except for the donuts. They were delivered by corporate, and they arrived frosted almost perfectly. They looked like the plastic donuts they show in commercials, always round and not squished together, and they would dip them in frosting so it was evenly spread and neat. It was a busy Saturday morning and was close to Valentine's Day, so we had a fresh order of brownie batter donuts delivered that morning. We were slammed, which was normal for a weekend, so it wasn't out of the ordinary to see my manager, who I'll call Jeremy, running around stressed out. When he first ran past me, I didn't think anything of it, and I continued making sandwiches at the sandwich station. He rushed by carrying a pastry tray, and I watched him begin frantically throwing something in the trash, looking worried as hell. At first I laughed and just said, "Jeremy, what the heck are you doing?" He straightened out and looked absolutely beside himself. I had never seen him look so lost, so I asked what was going on and if something was wrong. Someone filled the brownie batter donuts with staples. He told me that he got a phone from corporate that one of the stores in our chain, which contained 10, had somehow discovered multiple staples in every donut in their store. That was at least 48 donuts for our store, and more or less for the other 9, depending on their sales. They told Jeremy we had to get rid of the most recent delivery, because whoever put the batter in the filler dumped a ton of staples in it as well. Thankfully we hadn't sold all of the previous order yet from that morning, because it was still relatively early. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was going to be sick. What if a young child had gotten one of them? I pictured some family sitting at home on a Saturday morning, going out to get some drinks and donuts for the kids, and imagined everything else that could have happened after. I never found out what came of it, and as far as I know, neither did my boss. I'm assuming nothing happened, because I thankfully never heard anything on the news. Makes me wonder if they covered it up, though. And I hope they were able to find out who the asshole was who did it. This happened during summer 2 years ago. I had an early flight to catch, and I needed to buy some cheap travel-sized necessities before I drove myself to the airport. At around 4 a.m, I drove to Walmart and parked as close as I could to the entrance. As soon as I parked up, I looked to my left and noticed someone smoking out of a clear glass pipe. I thought to myself, this is what you get for being at Walmart at this hour. I got out of my car and noticed 2 cars in another row of parking spots. The cars were facing each other, and 3 guys were hanging out of them and talking. I just figured they were typical parking lot junkies and didn't think much of it, until they stopped their conversation and stared in my direction. I quickly walked into the store, got my things and was walking out. Now there were 5 men standing by the cars, and they all stopped what they were doing and stared at me as I unloaded my groceries into the trunk and got in my car. As soon as I started my vehicle, I looked in my side view mirror and saw that they had gotten in their cars and had started them. This made me feel immediately sick to my stomach. I pulled out of the parking lot, and sure enough, the 2 cars followed. The roads were quiet and it was obvious that they were tailing me. I merged onto the freeway and they followed. I got into the far left lane, just to validate my thoughts, and sure enough, they were right behind me. The freeway was pretty much empty, and my exit was coming up. I live in a downtown area, and my exit has 2 options. I chose the option that went to the busiest part of the town, not my exit. But these dudes wouldn't let up. When I got to the stoplight to turn into downtown off the freeway, I noticed the cars were full of people and looked to be only men. This scared the crap out of me. I fumbled onto the internet with my phone to get my city's non-emergency number. As I was calling, I made so many random turns and they followed me each time. I finally got a hold of someone and they told me that they're sending a cop to where I am. I can't stop my car, so I just kept driving in circles with these psychos behind me, and it looked like there were 8 of them in total between the 2 vehicles. The cop never found me, so I said forget it, and I drove straight to the police station. The cars followed me until I got there. Then they took a hard turn to avoid the station once they'd realized where I was leading them. I was pissed that the cops did virtually nothing, but I was so glad that I noticed right away and did not drive home. I am a 20-year-old female, and the story that I'm going to tell you happened just recently. I've had many creepy encounters and experienced a lot of truly scary things during my life, so I figured out this would be the right place to collect all of it. So my mother and I decided to go grocery shopping together 2 days ago. We took the car and I don't have a license yet, drove to the nearest and biggest mall to get as many supplies as possible. Because of the ongoing lockdown for the pandemic, it's better to make only a few trips to avoid unnecessary contact with people. It took us a while to arrive, and once she did, she pulled up near the stores, where I noticed a couple of men. It's very common in my area to find people stationing in malls and supermarkets, as they are usually quite harmless if you do as they say. They stay there waiting for cars to come, and when this happens, they show the drivers some parking spots to ask what is called a protection fee. Basically, you pay them, or otherwise they'll damage your vehicle. It is, of course, illegal, but the government here doesn't seem really bothered by these kinds of activities. Anyway, we'd met those illegal workers many times before, so it wasn't something too scary for us. Not at first, anyway. My mother parked the car, and then 2 of the men came near her window and asked for the fee, which wasn't much, luckily. While she was giving them the money, I looked out of the side I was sitting in and froze. There were at least 10 other men. 2 of them were fighting, I don't know over what, and one threw a punch too. Only when I looked closer, I saw something shiny. In his grip there was a knife. I started freaking out internally, because the situation was way more dangerous than it seemed at the beginning. The worst scenarios were running through my head. 2 women, 10 men with a weapon. I was then brought back to reality, where my mother told me to get out of the car to reach the stores, so I immediately jumped out of my seat and got by her side, ready to protect her. But when I saw she was chatting and exchanging jokes with one of the 2 dudes from before, I realized she hadn't seen the group of men that was coming towards us. My mum has a very sunny and friendly personality, which, let me tell you, can be a very dangerous thing around strangers. I'm not blaming her, I love my mother, but an excessive expansive attitude can cost you a lot. I know sometimes I come off as antisocial, but better be careful and distant than having a knife on your throat. I quickly told her we had to go, with urgency in my voice, but keeping a cold and firm tone. If you show people you are scared, then you are screwed. You must never show it, because it makes you an easier target. She followed me, asking what was wrong and trying to tell me that we were safe. So I whispered, "Keep going and stay silent." And only then she saw the group of men staring at us. She proceeded to look in another direction while walking, but I didn't. I gave one of the men a look full of hatred that was screaming, "Do not try to harm us, or I will fight." I know they were numerically superior, but I've been practicing boxing for years, so I wasn't going down without battling for my mother's life. The man got the message and looked away. It was still daytime, so if I screamed, people would hear us and call the cops. Plus, criminals prefer, as I said before, easy and weak targets. I hadn't brought weapons with me that day, I usually do, but I will make sure to never make this mistake again. We got out of the mall when it was getting dark. I suggested a secondary way to get to the car, as the men were all still in the parking lot. There was little light and we also had a lot of things to bring with us now. But we made it safely to the vehicle, because they didn't see us coming. But I swear, I am never going to forget my weapons from now on. So this happened to me just a few days ago. I work at a popular retail store in a mall close to my on-campus apartment. I was home for Christmas break and decided to work Christmas Eve since I was promised time and a half and I could use the money to buy some extra Christmas presents. My childhood home is not very far away from my apartment, but it's about an hour's drive from my work to my childhood home. Our holiday hours were extended this year, and I was given a closing shift for Christmas Eve. The store closed at around 10 p.m, and the closing shift ended at 10:30, meaning that I would be getting home around midnight, after swinging through a drive-thru to grab something to eat. The closing shift at the store usually had 2 employees and a manager working, but the other employee that was supposed to close with me was out sick, so it was just me and the manager. While the manager emptied and counted the cash drawers and wrote the daily report, I gathered up all the trash and cardboard and left it all by the back door in the stockroom. I dusted and vacuumed until the manager was finished with the daily report, and then he put in the combination to disable the alarm and held open the back door for me to take out the trash and cardboard. This was the part that was usually the most helpful, to have 2 employees instead of 1, because the dumpster was walled off and the manager had to wait by the door to make sure no one walked into the store. But the dumpster wasn't too far away, and I wanted to get home as soon as possible, so I carried all the trash out. Our store shared the dumpster with only 3 other stores, all of which closed either before or after us, so I wasn't expecting to see anyone at the dumpster. I was so startled that I dropped my bags when I saw someone digging through the trash. He looked up at me when he heard the bags fall. "Oh, hi. I dropped my wallet in the trash. Could you help me grab it?" he asked. 1,000 red flags went off in my brain, and I immediately began to back away. I don't think I can. I need to take out the trash and get back to my store," I said, trying to walk towards the store slowly. "Which store do you work at?" he asked. I'm not sure why I told him, but I told him the store I worked at and he nodded. "Oh, nice store. You can just leave the bags here. I'll toss them when I'm done looking." I went back into the store at that point, a little creeped out, but not suspecting anything else. I told my boss what happened and he laughed a little and offered to walk me to my car, as I was parked in the lot behind the store and he was parked in the parking garage attached to the main mall. I declined and walked to the nearly empty parking lot. There were only 3 cars in it, including mine. One car was parked close to the back entrance of a neighbouring restaurant, and the other car was parked just a few spots away from mine. I couldn't see the person inside, but the car was on, and it looked like the person was trying to warm up the car from the inside before scraping off the ice on the windshield. I glanced at the car a few times, just to mentally jot down the make and model of it, a blue Honda Accord, before getting into my car and locking the doors. I called my parents to let them know that I was just leaving now, and that I would be stopping to grab dinner on the way home, so not to wait up. I kept my eyes peeled for the different fast food joints on the side of the highway, but the majority of them were closed as it was 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve. I was getting hungrier and hungrier as I got closer and closer to the exit for my house. I had decided to just scrounge up some leftovers at home as I drove through my town, when I saw a subway with blinking lights that said, "Open late." I peeled into the parking lot of the subway and saw the red LED sign indicating that it was open. I walked into the sandwich shop and took a look around as it looked pretty empty. I called out to the empty store and was able to get the attention of the only person working there. "I thought I'd locked that door. We just closed," he said. "Come on, man. I just got off work and I just want to grab something to eat before I go to bed. I'll be really quick, I promise," I begged him. He sighed and agreed, probably taking pity on how exhausted I looked. We talked for a little bit about working the late shift on Christmas Eve as he made my sandwich, before a group of teenage boys walked into the store. "We're closed, guys. I'm going to lock the store after I've done making her sandwich," he said. "But I want a sandwich," one of the boys whined. "Fine." The subway employee got out from behind the counter and locked the door so no one else would be able to get in, and he could ensure that the teenagers would be his last customers of the night. He finished making my sandwich and left me to pick out my drink and chips at the soda fountain. Most of the boys only bought bags of chips or cookies, so they were all finished before I finished filling up my soda, and the subway employee disappeared into the back. I put the lid to my cup on and was looking for a straw when something caught my eye. The man from the dumpster was waiting in the parking lot next to my car. He was sitting on the hood of the car that was parked next to mine. It was the blue Honda Accord. I really started to freak out at that point. There was no reason for this guy to be in my town an hour away from the mall, at the exact place I decided to stop if he wasn't following me. And what was he doing on the hood of his car? It was the day before Christmas. It was snowing and below 30 degrees. "Hey, can you guys walk me to my car?" I asked the group of boys. "Yeah, you all right?" one of the boys asked. "Oh, I'm fine. I just don't want to slip on any ice," I lied. I felt a little silly because there was probably a perfectly good reason for the man from the dumpster to be in the parking lot, something that didn't have anything to do with me, but I was still nervous regardless. The boys walked me to my car and waited until I drove off. The man didn't even look at me as I got into my car. I had about 10 minutes until I got to my house, and I tried to shake the weird feeling I got about the man in the dumpster. It took me a little while to notice, but I realized that there was someone following me. It was hard to see because the car's lights were off, but I noticed the car when I glanced in my rearview mirror as I drove under a street lamp. I started to get nervous again and drove past my house and turned back onto the main road, hoping I would lose this guy. But this car stayed on my tail, and I watched in my rearview mirror as we went under a streetlight again. It was a blue Honda Accord. I pulled out my phone and called 911 and explained the situation to the dispatcher. They advised me to drive to the nearest police station and told me she would inform the police station of what was going on. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher until I pulled in. The Honda Accord drove past the station, and there was a police car waiting outside that drove after the guy, but ultimately there was nothing they could do besides give him a ticket for driving with his lights off. My description of the man by the dumpster matched the driver of the Accord. I don't know what he had planned, but I haven't seen him since, and I told my boss about the incident, so I won't have to take the trash out on my own anymore. This happened relatively recently, and I've decided to share now because it's been nagging me in the back of my mind for the past few days. It wasn't terrifying, but definitely freaky enough to send a shiver down my spine now and again. My older sister, we'll call her Stacy, lives in Missouri, and the rest of my immediate family lives in Illinois, so we don't get to see her often, but sometimes she visits. One of these times was back in November. Stacy, my mother, and I had decided to go to the mall because my birthday was coming up and they wanted an idea of what to get me. We had just come out of some jewelry store where I had picked up a ring, and some skinny, sick-looking man blocked our path down the hallway. The guy had this really creepy smile on his face, which made me really uncomfortable. He turned to my mum. "I like your hair, miss." Now, my mum's hair is beautiful. It's got very pretty tight curls and is slightly grey at the front, but isn't anything out of the ordinary. So this was odd to me, obviously, and I just had a horrible feeling in my stomach. This guy couldn't have been older than 25, and my mother was in her late 40s and married. It was just weird to me. My sister didn't seem to have the same feeling I did, though, because she turned to me and tried to suppress her laughter. "Thank you," my mum smiled, like the polite woman she is, and the man continued. "It's pretty." He reached out to actually touch her hair. We were complete strangers, mind you. My mum backed up uncomfortably and thanked him again before pushing past him quickly. Stacy was still amused by the situation, and we kept walking. That's when the man called out to us. "Miss!" My mum ignored him and we started walking a little faster. Stacy tugged up my arm and had me stand behind my mother alongside her, just to make her more comfortable. We assumed everything was fine, but when I looked back, that guy was walking a few paces behind us, not smiling anymore. It freaked me the hell out. I was extremely afraid, and I was shocked at how calm both my sister and my mother were being. We eventually looked down a mini hallway where there was a close community bathroom, and we all entered it, shutting the door behind us. I thought this was a horrible idea. I thought we would be followed inside. After a few minutes, however, it was obvious the man wasn't going to come into the restroom. I peeked outside of the cracked door, and he was standing across from the bathroom, looking off into the distance, leaning against the railing. He was waiting for us. I felt like we had trapped ourselves. I closed the door again. "Mum, that guy's waiting for us." Now my sister looked very worried and suggested calling our dad, just as another woman walked into the bathroom. "Hey!" My mother caught the woman's attention. "I'm sorry, Mum, but could we ask you a favour?" It took a few seconds of confusion before the woman nodded her head. "Did you happen to see a thin African-American man out there with a blue hat?" Mum asked, continuing when the woman nodded again. "He's been following us. Is there any way you could find an officer to help us out?" The woman's eyes were wide and she replied, "Yeah, of course," before briskly leaving the bathroom. In a matter of minutes, my father had been called and briefed about the situation, and the lady re-entered the room. "I got a cop out there and the guy's gone. Are you guys okay?" My sister started to explain the situation to this woman, whilst my mum was still on the phone, and she understood how shook up we were and asked if we'd like her to escort us out. My mother shook her head and my sister politely declined. I stayed quiet. I still wanted to be protected, but I was younger than both of them, and I trusted their judgment. "All right, stay safe." The woman nodded and entered a stall, since we had kept her from using the restroom and the first time she'd come in. Stacy, my mum and I left the bathroom after thanking her and decided that was enough of the mall for one day. We went home and recounted the story to my brother and father, who had until then only heard bits and pieces. I was just glad we got home safe, but I still psych myself out sometimes about it. What would have happened if we hadn't gone into the bathroom? What if the woman wasn't there to help us? What if it had only been my mother? It may have played out very differently. It always seemed like a long drive to get to anywhere we needed to go. We lived in a small town, and all that was close to home was a grocery store and some small little businesses, like trading card shops, fast food joints, and second-hand stores. The commute for anything fun was an adventure every time. Nothing to do in the car but to think about things and enjoy the scenic view of desert plants and dirt. My birthday month was always so exciting for me. I always knew that my parents would take me to pick out a toy at the Walmart that was roughly 45 minutes from where we lived. I kept thinking of what I wanted to get and thought about all the neat toys I saw last time we were there. The toys I wanted ranged from Cabbage Patch dolls to Barbies to friendship bracelet DIY kits. The possibilities were endless, and it didn't take much to make me happy. We pulled up to Walmart and all emerged from the car, stretching our legs and shaking off the tightness from our long drive. I was eager to get into the store and scope out all the toys in the toy section, which was near the back of the store. We've been to this Walmart for years, and my parents knew pretty much everyone that worked there, so getting past the front entrance took time as they had to greet everyone and tell them whose birthday it was. Me, yes, I know I'm getting so big, blah blah blah. I wanted to get to the toys. Finally, my mum was about to let us loose. She told us she was going to the part of the store to pick up toiletries, so I nodded my head, waiting for her to say we could go, but not really listening, as I was eyeing the direction I was going to dart to. She said to meet her back here if we couldn't find her. I'm assuming she said in the area where you pick up all the soaps and such, shaking my head, acting like I was listening. "Okay, I love you," she says, and I was off, making my way to find the best birthday gift of them all for this year. Strolling up and down the few aisles they had there for their toy section, I looked carefully. As you know, their toy section is split into categories: a boy section and a girl section, babies and a bike section. I was in the girly section this time. It was 2 down from an open walkway in the back of the store. There were no other kids there that day in that area. It was just little old me, which I was happy with. That meant I didn't have to worry about some other kid possibly taking the greatest toy of all time on my day. I was at the end of the aisle towards the back wall, where you could tell was close to the garden that had all the outdoor equipment, slowly rolling out the further you roamed in that direction. In my hands I had found this Cabbage Patch doll that you could feed fake food to, and she would eat it. I was in complete amazement. Standing there, I was looking at the box, excited to see all the things she came with. Just then, I saw a taller, older man walk past the other side of the aisle. I didn't think anything of it. We're at a store and he obviously must be shopping, right? I see him then at the end of the aisle I was in. He stood there looking at toys just up the way from me. I thought he must be getting his granddaughter a gift. Is it her birthday too? Looking back down at the doll, I want to show my mum, when I suddenly felt this large hand grab my ass tightly and then groped me. I jumped forward, dropping my doll. I turned around to see who had done that to me, and I looked back down the aisle where I thought that man was at, and he was nowhere to be seen. I was panicking and felt so disgusted with myself. I searched the store for my mother, also scanning for that man so I could tell her what he had done. But I couldn't find her, and I didn't see him anywhere. I couldn't remember where my mother had said she would be. If only I had listened. I made my way to the front of the store, asking the front register lady to call for my mum. She waved at me to quieten down as she was ringing up her customers. As I was standing there, I saw the man, and he had his eyes locked onto me as he was making his way out of the front doors. He was gone. Just then I felt a hand rub my shoulder, and I whipped round and slapped my mother's hand. She was confused and apologized for embarrassing the birthday girl. But she continued to go on about how I was too old to get love from Mama, and so on and so on. I just stood there looking around for this guy. My mother asked me where my toy was. I had dropped it when Creepy groped me and didn't pick it back up, so she told me to run back and grab it. I shook my head no, but she couldn't understand why I was acting the way I was and pulled me into the bathroom. She threatened to give me something to cry about if I didn't straighten up. And long story short, I never told my mum about what happened, because I was so young and embarrassed by it. I just didn't know how to say it. I felt she wouldn't have believed me anyway. I did end up getting my doll, but I got her for Christmas because I couldn't straighten up how she wanted me to on my birthday. I ended up with nothing since I refused to go back to the toy section alone. So I'm not sure if I was overreacting or not, but here goes. A week ago I was in my local Rite Aid, which is closer to me than a grocery store. It was around 6 p.m. but dark out because it was winter. I was picking up something to drink when I noticed a man that seemed like he was following me. He kept walking past me, albeit in the next aisle over, and looking at me and making too much eye contact for my liking. You know, creepy stuff young women learn to pay attention to. I was thinking that maybe I was just being paranoid, but he hadn't picked anything up to buy as you would if you were in a store. I tried to wait until he was finished checking out to try to put some distance between us, but he ended up being in line in front of me because it wasn't busy. He checked out then moved over to the side, and I'm not gonna lie, I felt the need to pay attention to and remember his build, clothes and potential age, etc. The way you would describe someone to the cops. That's how much he was staring at me. Then I went to pay, and the cashier, a woman, gave me a WTF look, and really expressed it. She seemed less worried than me though. So while I was paying, he moved over to the side and continued to watch me. He then walked slowly through the doors to the left and was staring at me the entire time. I felt a moment of relief, but it was short-lived, as he came back in and again just stared at me the whole time, as he walked to the lottery table with the tickets that you fill out yourself. He then left again, walking slowly and staring at me still. But then he came back in again, doing the same thing, grabbing another lottery ticket and left, still staring at me. The cashier gave me another nervous smile, as I was wondering what the hell I should do. I waited, taking a long time to put my debit card away, anything to pass the time. I finally, after around 10 minutes, decided to leave the store to see if he had at least driven away. But no. He was parked in a tan minivan and was sitting in it still looking at me. I put my bags down and pondered at the thought of whether I should call my sister to walk me home, because we don't have cars, as I didn't feel it was safe to do so. But I really didn't want to pay for an Uber to go home, because it's so close and I'm trying to save money. He eventually drove away out of the parking lot, passing right by me. I then saw him drive to the gas station on the corner from Rite Aid and park there, but not at the gas pumps, just the lot. Great, now I have to get the Uber, and it was 8 minutes away. When it pulled up, the man from the store started to back up his car to leave right away. I didn't want him to follow me home, so I asked the guy driving the Uber to take the alleyways home instead. Now the only things I can think about in hindsight are all of the things I could have done differently. I felt guilty for not calling the cops, but I don't think they would have been able to do anything for me anyway. I felt a responsibility to make sure he didn't hurt anyone else though. Also, I didn't get his license plate or picture, but to be honest, I just froze from beginning to end. My older sister told me I should have been loud with him and said something to him. She meant well, but I didn't want him to know my voice, and I didn't want to piss him off, because outside of the store, there were no cameras or witnesses. So I'm a 20-year-old female that works at a home improvement store. My co-worker, who also happens to be my team leader, is a mother of 2 children and married, and this is important and comes into play later on. We were in the self-checkout area, and she was fixing one of the registers. The register she was working on put her with her back facing towards the customers. Nothing weird happened at first, and I was doing my normal rounds. Then this old dude comes up to the register that I had just cleaned. So I greeted him, and he did the same. He must have been in his 50s, and he started scanning his stuff. And I noticed one of his items had a security tag on, so I went to go grab a magnet. But as I was walking towards him, I casually mentioned that I have to take the tag off. He didn't really say anything, just nodded. I then tried to strike up a conversation with him, and he was answering me, but wasn't looking directly at me. He was fixed on something behind me. I thought the guy was just zoning out, but when he sees that I'd noticed, he quickly looked at me, then continued the conversation. It was pretty obvious that he was forcing it though. Anyway, I took the magnet off and went to return it. I came back to do my rounds, when just then I noticed the same guy was still there, and he had changed the way he was facing. He was folding his receipt, but I could see his eyes were staring at something in front. It hadn't hit me at first until I turned to see what he was looking at. He was staring at my team leader. Well, more specifically a certain part of her. She had bent down to lock up the register. I felt my stomach drop, and this sudden urge to throw up. I turned back to the guy and noticed he'd pulled out his phone, and before he had the chance to do anything, I walked up to him and asked if he still needed any help with anything. In a low voice he said, "Yeah, can you help me get a piece of that beauty over there?" Without thinking I said, "I'm sure her husband thinks she's beautiful as well." After that he just stared at me blankly, then said, "He doesn't have to know." He had this predatory look in his eyes. By this point I was beyond disgusted and was just livid. In a loud voice I said, "Thank you for shopping with us, have a great day." And at the sudden rise of my voice, a few people turned around, and that was enough for him to take off in a hurry. My team leader hugged and thanked me after I told her what had happened. So this happened, I think, back in 2017. I'm a female and was 18 years old at the time. Also in this story is my sister, 23, my mum, 43, and my niece, who was just 1. So I was carrying my niece on my hip as we walked through a newly opened Walmart that's near to where my sister lives. We were looking for birthday decoration for her party, and I'd flown there for the occasion as I live states away. Now my sister lives in a very safe city, but the Walmart was in a sketchier town near hers in Texas. My mother and my sister had wandered off to look at balloons, and my niece and I went to the toy aisle so she could pick her gift. At this point I had actually noticed 2 Hispanic men that seemed to be following us. Now I'm a petite blonde and she's a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. We're not very intimidating. She began to fuss as I noticed that one of those guys was trying to get her to wiggle away from me, but I held on tight and left the aisle immediately and went to find our family. Wandering through aisles, we were frantically looking for my mum and sister, and everywhere we went, these two men were as well. Eventually we got boxed in an aisle by them, and they started walking down the aisle towards us, shrinking the distance between us. I threw my niece onto my hip opposite my purse and threw my hand into my concealed carry pocket where I normally have my gun. Because I'd flown here, I hadn't been able to bring it. I knew if I didn't do anything then and there, then they'd definitely take my niece, and she's my world. I wasn't going to let them take her, no matter what happened to me. I stood up straight, and with every ounce of my confidence I had, I said, very loudly, "I know you two have been following us, and if you touch a hair on her head or try to take her, I will shoot you, and I won't lose a wink of sleep. So if you value your scummy lives, leave us the hell alone. If I see you anywhere else in the store or parking lot, or if I think you're following us home, I'll find you and kill you." They promptly ran off and my mum heard me. Her and my sister ran over and called the cops. Then I put my niece in the cart and never left her side just in case. This story happened to one of my close friends, and it's 100% true. It was right after Thanksgiving, and my friend was working at the outlet mall on Black Friday. After her shift, she was walking to her car on the opposite side of the mall, with her AirPods in, but unfortunately her phone had a low battery. When she walked out of her store, she saw a man about 35 to 40 feet away, who was wearing all black. His back was turned and he was just adjusting his jacket, so she didn't think anything of it at first, and kept walking. Now keep in mind, there was nobody else around, no customers and no employees, just them. Whilst walking, she turned around and noticed that the man was walking in her direction with his head down. She couldn't see his face, so she started to get nervous. She decided to make a wrong turn on purpose and went in a different direction, kind of going in a circle. She thought she'd lost him at that point, but was still paranoid, until a few seconds later, when she sees him walking in her direction again. Now she knew she was being followed, and tried to call her mom, but the call failed because the signal was terrible. She cleverly, though, had the idea of posting on Instagram the fact that she was being followed, so that everyone would be aware if anything did happen. Now she's speed walking, and as I said earlier, she had her AirPods in, and when the song changed, during the 2-second wait, she heard loud footsteps. Quickly turning around, she saw the man was charging at her with a knife in his hand. She started running and screaming, and at this point she didn't go to her car, but instead wanted to find people or a busy area. The man was catching up to her fast, so she cut through a bush and dropped her phone in the process, but she made it to a 7-Eleven, ran inside crying, and asked for help. Before she'd gotten inside, though, she turned around and the man was gone. He hadn't crossed the street or anything, probably because it was lit up and busier there. So they called the police and she made a statement. The officer helped her find her phone, which had died, so she couldn't call anyone until she made it home. Then the officer walked her to her car. The next morning she called my friends and I to tell us the story. This is a second incident that I'd posted after a previous incident involving a bus, and I'd actually bought a car right after it, so I had a car loan to pay off. But I was so shaken up after that I decided it was worth it. But unfortunately, I'm an idiot, and I decided one night, in the middle of the night, that I needed to grab something from Walmart. I don't remember what time it was at this point, and I don't even remember what I wanted to get. But what I do remember is that I was getting out of my car when I saw a rusted car pull up to the front of the building. The larger person in the driver's seat kind of shoved some skinny, dishevelled-looking late teen to early 20-year-old out of the car and was kind of aggressively ordering him to do something. Then he drove off. I noticed the teenager look at me as I closed my door and scurried into the store. I had kind of a don't involve me mentality. I didn't know what they were doing, and I didn't want to be involved in whatever it was. This interaction lasted a few minutes. Then I immediately went into the woman's clothing section because I wanted to be further away from the entrance when he came in. But that obvious drug addict immediately ran up to me. Now I can be naive, but I'm not completely sheltered. As soon as he opened his mouth, I knew he was going to ask me for money, and money is a pet peeve of mine. You see, I work hard. I make very little money for it. I was lifting boxes of products, assembling furniture, and having to take a bus with crazy people before I had my car. And if I missed the bus, I would have to walk miles to get home. I realized at this point that the person who dropped him off had ordered him to get money some way or another, and this really annoyed me. I could see him preparing himself to try and look pitiful, opening his eyes wide to look innocent. But I guess he didn't understand how insincere he looked right off the bat. He began to speak. "Ma'am, can I ask you—" "No," I snapped back immediately. I didn't want to hear whatever lie he was about to tell me. He tried a few more times, got mad and stalked off, pissed at me. He found the lady working in the changing rooms, and I could hear him talking to her in the same insincere tone, complaining about me to gain some sympathy. "Ma'am, you won't believe how rude this—" She cut him off too, and I heard her call out on the radio very loudly. "Security, come get this crackhead out of here." I heard him pleading with her, and her yelling at him for a minute before security came to escort him out. It was very funny at that moment, and I thought that that was it. I went about my business and checked out, and I was about to step out when I suddenly had a thought. That guy is mad at me, knows where I parked, and his ride drove off, leaving him there. So that means he is still out there. There were only 4 cars in the parking lot at the time, mine with 2 others next to it, and one a row after mine. I thought I was overreacting, but I felt like it was a bad idea to go out there alone. I stood there for a few minutes contemplating getting security to walk me out, when I heard someone getting checked out and looked to see that it was a very well put-together tall man who seemed nice, so I waited and asked him to walk me to my car. He was from the car the row after mine, and he didn't mind at all, so I walked with him to my car, got in and locked the door, and he walked to his. I really thought I had overreacted, as I thought I was being paranoid, until I pulled out and drove past the 2 cars that were next to me to leave, and saw the young guy stand up from crouching position from between the 2 cars next to mine and walk off. I stopped going out alone at night after that, and I started keeping my pepper spray in my hands in parking lots if I did. Hey there, it's me again, Miss Fearsome. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, then please hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to support me further, please check out my Patreon and sign up for as little as $1 a month. Also, check out my new YouTube membership levels for some exclusive perks. So until next time, stay happy, stay safe, and remember, keep being creepy.